we asked NASA, who was the person that really is thinking about the vision for the urban future that goes beyond this planet, but also includes this planet? And we figured, you know, it's got to be somebody at NASA Ames because it's their best research center and it's here in the Valley. Doctorate, preferably Stanford. Somebody deep in the sciences. Somebody who's really thinking not just outside the box, but outside the big box. And we were lucky to find Rosalind Grymes. And she's been with us the whole time. Some of you have met her. She's an amazing resource. She has been 25 years of service at NASA. She was recruited after starting as a research scientist to join the NASA Astrobiology Institute, which not only worries about life outside our planetary system, but also is a virtual institute. So she's figured out how to have an impact at a low cost with a very high yield of effort. And this is obviously the method to NASA's work in this century. And we're really, really pleased that she's here to join us. Thank you, Rosalind, so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Gordon. That was a wonderful introduction. I would like to can that and use that in many other locations. Hello, meeting of the minds. Van promised you beer soon, and unfortunately, I still stand between you and beer and some other closing activities. But then the sun isn't yet over the yardarm, so you can put up with waiting a little while longer. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your presentations over the last couple of days. Has it not been a drink from a fire hose? I think so too. So thank you for your presentations. Thank you for all the stimulating conversations and for all the connections to friends that up until Meeting of the Minds, I didn't know I had not yet met. So I want to talk to you about NASA's role in urbanscapes and urban futures, and to start by anchoring that in what NASA's primary business is, aeronautics and space exploration, and tell you a little bit about how that relates to sustainable futures. So let's explore that theme. Here is NASA Silicon Valley. So this is the NASA Ames campus. It's a little city. It takes a village. We have not only scientists and engineers, and we have our share of managers. We have plumbers and electricians. We have human resources specialists. We have student interns. I wanted to mention after Van's presentation, we have a lot of students who come and work at NASA Ames. In the summer, our roles are swelled by, last summer, I think it was 800 students came to work at NASA Ames. We have a whole range of job categories, and it takes all of them to make this village work. You can color in some additional blue at the top of that screen if we think about sea level rise. We too, like other locations around San Francisco Bay, are at risk of sea level rise. Because we're the agency that operates much of the Earth-observing infrastructure, the satellites and the unmanned aerial vehicles, NASA headquarters realized a number of years ago that we should really use that information and our own in-house expertise in Earth scientists to evaluate what our downscale, finely tuned regional risks were for all 10 of the NASA centers all across the country. So we know here at Ames that our primary risks are sea level rise and extreme storm events, not to mention seismic activity, but that's not a result of climate change. So let's think a little bit about where rising sea level can take us. This visualization shows you a variety of different numbers of sea level rise, 2 meters, 3 meters, 4 meters, 6 meters. And it's a visualization based on the volume of water that's contained in the Greenland ice field. There's no evidence at the moment that I'm aware of that there is catastrophic melting in this ice sheet, but there is thinning, there is melting, and if it were to catastrophically melt, it has enough water volume in it to raise sea level by 6 feet. 6 meters, I take that back, 6 meters. It's important to get your units right. So here you see the impact on a couple of cities that are of concern to us, New Orleans, Miami. Say goodbye to Miami. New Orleans, maybe you could put dikes and berms, but there's not a lot of good ways to save Miami. So this is a serious problem. And here you see a graph of CO2 in the atmosphere from data derived from the atmospheric infrared sounder on NASA's Aqua satellite. The colors here are about CO2 concentration, not about temperature. It can be misleading. The red is the very high CO2 concentrations. And against that is a graph of measurements that are taken at Mauna Loa. So Ayers reads the mid-troposphere. Mauna Loa is at top of our atmosphere, and it takes a while for the mixing to occur and for the two readings to coincide. I could have chosen other time-lapse visuals to show you temperature instead of CO2. They're equally scary scenarios, equally scary images, and I'm sure you've seen them before. So this is an example of how NASA's Earth observing mission is looking at our environment in a planetary context, something that would be very important for us to do. And here is a consideration of our planet in the context of the solar system and other solar systems. About 35 years ago, the technique of planetary transits, looking for planets around other stars by seeing how their light emissions dim when a body moves in front of them. So when a planet in their system moves in front of the star, it detracts from the light coming from that star momentarily. About 25 years ago, the first extrasolar planet was detected using that technique around the early 90s. Today, over 1,000 planets have been cataloged in solar systems beyond ours. Kepler is one such mission. It stares at a fragment of the Milky Way galaxy looking for planets, and because it stares in this very focused way, it's able to collect highly valid light measurements and can therefore detect planets that are even smaller than the ones that had been seen before with telescopes. So this is an artist's conception of the first nearly Earth-sized planet detected by Kepler, and it's around a sun which is somewhat like our own, a yellow G-type star. Think of the question about whether there is life beyond Earth. We now have the tools in hand to answer that question, and the maturity of the questions that we're asking is going to lead us to that answer. It could be next month, it could be next year, it could be 10 years, it could be tomorrow. But we're on the verge of intellectually knowing that answer. And I think that will be paradigm changing. And yet I want to propose to you, because you Meeting of the Minds people, you're a special set. I think the question itself is paradigm changing. Let's think about the decision tree. Are we alone? No. Let's say there's life somewhere else. Well, that's an enormity, but at the same time, it makes us think perhaps a little differently about life on Earth. If we're not alone, then what's unique about us is that we are humanity, we are on a planet full of different species, a fertile planet where life has evolved in so many different ways. Life here is precious and it's unique, and this is our home planet. Let's look at the other side of the tree. Are we alone? Yes. Or yes, as far as we know, we don't yet have any evidence that there's life elsewhere. Well, then the thought process is, well, life here must be really special, really precious, really unique, if we can't find evidence of it anywhere else yet with the tools that we're using. So that, again, makes us look at the home planet and say, we should really be worried about sustaining this pale blue dot, this closed system. It's a big system, but it's a closed system. So those are a couple of examples of how NASA's Earth observing mission makes us think about our environment in a planetary context, how our space exploration mission drives us to the same conclusion. Here are some specific areas of research that I thought might have some resonance for you in the topics that we've been talking about. Here on autonomy, the image on your left, I'm right left challenged, is a press release from a partnership that was announced earlier this year between NASA Ames and Nissan on autonomous vehicles. And the other panel shows you the Mars exploration rover. I don't know if this is Spirit or Opportunity. Opportunity is about to bed down on a sunny slope in Mars to weather the Martian winter. Opportunity is still operating. It landed on Mars in 2004, you may recall, and has been operating now for 11 years. Spirit stopped operating, I think it was in 2007. Both Spirit and Opportunity were second-generation autonomous vehicles on Mars. The first was Sojourner, I'm sure you all remember, on Mars Pathfinder. I'm sure you all wanted to shout that out. Y'all knew that. Sojourner traveled in its entire life cycle, which was about 3 months on Mars, the same distance as Spirit and Opportunity traveled on their first day. And you can conceptualize the idea of driverless cars or autonomous vehicles because you're accustomed to Google Maps, you're accustomed to working with Waze or other commute apps. And there's a lot of data about the roads that you drive. Something unexpected can happen. A ball can bounce out just like it did between cars, and those drivers had videos that many of us took. So you have to have real-time alert. But on Mars, this is a completely novel environment. Spirit and Opportunity navigated autonomously with cameras that delivered 3D imaging to the rover, which was then capable of registering 16,000 points in those images. It would have a pre-programmed destination, but it would then determine the safest, most efficient route to that destination. It would travel it for a while and then stop and take readings again. This is an image that I took from a recent conference on unmanned aerial vehicles traffic management. NASA's role in this dialogue comes from its expertise in working in the national airspace and developing tools for increasing safe automation of the national airspace, both in the air and on the ground. So we discussed in Tour 10 yesterday about the future of drones, what the challenges are of operating these vehicles and considering cities as three-dimensional transportation scapes. So NASA has a place at the table in talking with the FAA and other organizations about how to manage the traffic that will result here. This is the Space Act in 1958 that formed NASA, and I've excerpted just a few of the statements to try and explain partly why I'm here today and why NASA is so enthusiastic about engaging with you. It is part of our charter and part of our culture to disseminate our knowledge as broadly as possible, to participate in leading US industry, maintaining leadership for the United States in science and technology, and also for collaborating internationally. And all these things are really part of our DNA, I can tell you. We walk the talk, we live and breathe it, we eat and drink it. We're really about this. And how do you connect with NASA? NASA's technologies can be licensed. There are exclusive licenses, non-exclusive licenses. There are software licenses, software usage agreements. Some software is released open source. And you can find out much more about this at technology.nasa.gov. Internships, intern.nasa.gov. And what hasn't been mentioned before, I think, today is the small business innovative research. Federal agencies of the size of NASA's research portfolio are required to invest 3% of their overall budget in the small business innovative research, small business technology transfer programs, sbir.nasa.gov. There's over $500 million available. There are many topics which also can cross over between your interests and NASA's interests. That call for proposals comes out, I think, once a year, and I understand it's coming out in November. So this is very timely. This is Sustainability Base, our LEED Platinum facility. We heard from Dave earlier today, Dave Pogue, that in the size range under 100,000 square feet, only 5% of buildings have any LEED or Energy Star certification. We have LEED Platinum. We've also incorporated NASA technologies inside. We're using the same water recycling technology that was developed at Ames for use on the space station. On the station, the astronauts are allowed 2 liters of water a day, and it's all recycled, using a combination of what we heard about in new water, the reverse osmosis and forward osmosis. So our system is a 2-stage system with both forward and reverse osmosis, and we're using it in this building to decrease our water footprint. We're also incorporating other NASA technologies and constantly using this as a living laboratory. And we heard during the Innovation Incubator presentation the challenge of getting energy data. So this is a high-performing building, LEED Platinum, and we're committed to being transparent about what our energy use is. And we're also committed to recommissioning the building with LEED. We hope to do that this year, because as has not been mentioned, at least I haven't heard it, is that frequently human behavior defeats design in LEED buildings. And what is designed as LEED, platinum, gold, or silver, 2 or 3 years later is not performing to design specs. So we don't want that to happen here, but we want to be transparent about what is happening. And finally, think about cities in space. We know about the economic opportunities that were made available from the satellites in near-Earth orbit and geostationary orbit. We're on the verge of what are the economic opportunities in cislunar orbit between the Earth and the Moon. What can be done? What asteroids could be captured and mined? What resources exist on the Moon? What industries would happen in space, in microgravity, that couldn't progress on the ground? And NASA is the agency with the experience in sending instruments and humans safely and returning them. So we want to contribute that expertise and invest in the emerging commercial use of space. And if we go and work there, we're going to live there. Transporting everything that we need and returning people back and forth at the end of the day is not going to be practical. So we're going to be looking at self-sustaining habitats. And in fact, a lot of the research that we've incorporated in sustainability base, much of what I think would be of interest to you in technology transfer, comes about because of our investment in understanding human habitats in space. An opportunity to re-envision our legacy in communities and what we've learned over the next 20 to 30 years in how our cities evolve, and take the best of that when we design communities for living and working in space. So I want to thank you for your attention and take this opportunity while I still have the podium to especially thank Jesse and Gordon and their staff. I think on behalf of all of us, you'd like to give him a round of applause as he kicks me off the stage.